I think we are on 68A4 at the last paragraph.
Yep.
So actually, we didn't do that. We have to go from the first paragraph here on the left side, where it says the Gemara relates. Amarle Reveler of Chista, Darshinan Mishmach Halacha Rabbi Yehuda. That part we did. So let's go. Can I say that you pass with Rabbi Yehuda? Amarle Hey Rabbi Hani Maliasu Tijushu Bishmai. It may be Hashem's will that any good thing I say, you should repeat in my name. Umiyama Rabbi Hacha, but did Rabbi really say we passing with Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Omer Bas Hani Zonas Mina Achin. Rabbi holds that a daughter who's being getting her food, she's getting supported by her brothers, meaning the father died, and she's not married. So the brothers who are in charge of the father's estate now, they are giving her money for food, for clothes. Tell us Eastern Achasim. When she gets married, she gets 1/10 of the estate for a dowry. And Rabbi says halacha is like Rabbi. So how could Rabbi say that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? That we follow. We ask people who knew him and say, what would they have given? So lo kasha hadam dine hadalam dine. When you know what it is, Rabbi Yehuda says, we ask the people who knew him, and they say, what would he have given? But when we don't know, then he passes like Rabbi. You give when you don't know. Otherwise, you'll give her 10% of the estate as a dowry. Hachanami mistavra, and this makes sense. The Amar Rav Adabar Ava, because Rav Adabar Ava says, Ma'isa, there was an incident that a girl was trying to get to find out how much she would get from her dowry from her father's estate. Rebbe gave her 1/12. Kasha Dadi, that contradicts this other statement of Rebbe that she gets 10%. How come Rebbe gave her 1/12, which is less than 10%, and this other statement Rebbe gave her 10%? Elulav Shmamina. Rather, we have to learn from this incident, Hadam Dine, this case where he gave her 1/12 of the estate was when we knew what the father would have given. We knew him, or we asked people who knew him well, and they said this is what he would have given. And Hadalo Amidne. And when we didn't know what he going to give, Rabbi says 10%. So the halacha is, the way that Rabbi Paskins is that when we say that if we don't know, so if we don't know, according to Rabbi, we give 10%. But if we do know, we pass on to Rabbi Yehuda and we give what we would have known. So that could be lakula, it could be lachumra. Sometimes it could be more than the 10%. Sometimes it could be less than the 10%. Gufa. So shmamina. So yeah, we can learn from there that Rabbi's own opinion is. So it's not like Rabbi is arguing Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi himself held that if you don't know, it's 10%. But if you did know what the late father would have given as a dowry, we would give the amount that he would have given, or the percentage that he would have given. Gufa, we quoted a brisa that said, Amar Rabbi said, Basan izos mina achin notels iser nachasim. A daughter who is getting sustenance from the brother, she takes 1/10 of the estate for her dowry. Amar lo Rabbi, they said to Rabbi, Lidvoracha, according to you, Misha Ishla Eser Banim Ubanos, Ein Laben B'Makom Banos Klum. If he has 10 daughters and a son, the son is going to have nothing left because each of the daughters takes 1/10. So that's 100%. The son is not going to get anything. That doesn't make sense. Ein lo laben b'makom benos klum. The son's not going to get anything after the daughters are done with it. Amar lahen, Rabbi says, Kachni Amar, this is what I mean. Rishona nitel iser nechasim. The first one takes 1/10. Shnia b'mashashira. The other one takes 1/10 from what's left. Ulishlishis b'mashashira. And again, the third one takes 1/10 with what's left. So its percentages are not coming at the same time. So if there's $100 $1,000 originally, the first one will get $100. Now there's 900 left. So then the next one will get $90. Then there's going to be so we're going to $810, and the next one's going to get $81, 10% of what left. So when you're taking percentages, you're not going to get down to zero. There's not going to be that much left, but there's going to be something left. and they each get equally. So the Gemara says, everyone got their portion. So why did he just say everyone gets it equal? If they come at the same time to get married, then they take an equal portion. Rav Masna. Because Rav Masna said, if all of them or multiple daughters were going to get married at the same time, they take one. They take 1/10. What does it mean to take 1/10? If you would have given each one 1/10 of his property, now that 4 of them are getting married at the same time, you're going to take $100 from his estate and give each one $25. He would have given each one 100. Now you're saying they each get, you take 1/10 and they each get equal. That doesn't make sense. They take 1/10 together. So what you do is, according to this, you'll take, if it was $1,000, and let's just say there were 3 of them, you'll take $100. It's 10% of the $1,000. Then you have 900 left. You'll take 90 from the $900. You'll have 810 left. You'll take 81 from the 810. So you'll take the 81 plus the 90 plus 100. So it's what, 271? And you'll split that 271 equally. So each of the third get 90 and a third. So they got it because they were getting married at the same time. They get the same amount, but it's true we take from the father's estate in tenths, but because they're getting married at the same time, we split that the however many tenths there are, but they're getting married at the same time, they get split equally. That makes sense?
There was a movie many years ago called Seven Brides. I keep thinking of that, looking at all these numbers.
But the main point from this Gemara though is, well, there's 2 main points. One is if we know what the father would have given, that's what we give. If we don't know what the father would have given, we give him 10%. And then the question is if multiple are getting married at the same time. So according to this, you take 10% and then 10% and then 10%, and you add up those 3 10%, and you divide it by, or in this my example, and you divide by 3, so they each get the same amount because they're getting married at approximately the same time. Tanarbana, we learned in the Braisa. Habano, Spain Bagru. Okay, so now this is a slightly different topic. Well, not that it's the same topic, but it's a different case now. Tanarbana and Habanos. Bain Bagru Achlo Nisu, Bain Nisu Achlo Bagru. So if daughters, the guy died, unfortunately, and he had unmarried daughters. Whether they became a Bogeris. So remember, we have a Katana until she's about 12 and shows the signs of physical maturity. And then for 6 months, she's a Nara. And then at the 6 months later, she's a Bogeris. So whether she became a Bogeris before she got married, or if she got married before she became a Bogeris, they lost their food that they're getting supported by the father's estate, but they don't lose getting a dowry. Divrei Rabbi. This is the words of Rabbi. So obviously, if they got married, they get the dowry. If they became a Bogeris and they weren't married yet, even if the father's estate doesn't have to support them once they became a Bogeris, but he still is going to the state still has to give them a dowry. That's Rebbe's opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Af Ivdu Parnasasam. They also don't have a dowry. Ketzad Heinosos. So what do we do? How do they get a dowry if the halacha is that they don't? Sochros lahen bailim umotzi lahen parnasasam. So this is a little bit strange. They rent their husbands, and the husbands get the amount of their parnasa as their wages. So Rashi says, it's I don't know if it's as if, or even though they're not a Bogeris yet, they get married to these men. So I'm not using a good translate, but sochros means you hire as a could be hire as a like a worker. So it's basically saying they should get married early, and then their husbands are going to be able to get money from the estate for them. The Irish girl says that the fact basically, besides for just marrying you, we're going to give you for however many months until they become a Bulgaris, you'll get, $15 a month. So it was an incentive to basically, so basically,
That's here in addition to the dowry.
right. So
Oh,
what
I
it,
thought this was the dowry.
no, so basically we want to, it's a marketing technique. We want to be able to say, oh, these are great girls. You want to marry them because besides for getting the dowry, if you marry them now, you're going to get an extra, 6 months of $15 a month.
Let's call here.
So a girl, so there's, for a boy, it's pretty simple. Before their bar mitzvah, they're a katan, they're a minor, legally minor. Then after the bar mitzvah, they're legally an adult. Girls have 3 levels of statuses. The first status is a katana, a minor, and that's until around age 12. Then once they're around age 12 and show signs of puberty, they're called a nara, and they're nara for 6 months. And after the 6 months, she's a bogeres. And so there's certain financial independence laws of that apply to a bogeres and different ages. We learned earlier when the father could marry off his daughter, but when she's a bogeres, he's not allowed to marry her off anymore. When she's a katana, she's not allowed to marry herself off because she can't accept kedushin from someone because she's a minor. And as a minor, she can't make a good legal decision. And okay. I'm still softer. Okay. Amr Rav Nachman, Amr Li Huna Hilchos like Rabbi. Rav Nachman said, Huna said, meaning Rav Huna says, we're passing like Rabbi. Esvei Rav Nachman, Rabbi asked against Rav Nachman. Yisoma Shisia Imo Achami Daita. So from a Torah standpoint, only the father can marry off his minor daughter. But what if the father died? So sometimes the brother and the sister will try, and excuse me, the mother and the brother will try to marry off the girl. So for example, in the end of Parshas Chayesara, at the end of Toldos, after Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Haran to look for a wife from Lavan's family, from Rivka's family. So the Torah says that Esav saw that the Canaanite women were bad in the eyes of his father. So he went to Yishmael and he married as Machalas Bas Yishmael Achos Nevayos. Machalas, the daughter of Yishmael, the brother of Nevayos. So why does it have to say who her brother is? So Chazal say that Yishmael had actually died around that time. So Yishmael wasn't able to marry her off. So her brother married her off. So halachically, so that obviously Yishmael isn't Jewish, but halachically, if the mother and the brother marry her off, she's able to retract it, and then the wedding is considered annulled, not divorced, but it's considered annulled that it never happened. So here we're talking about a case of a minor girl whose father died, and her mother or her brother married her off with her consent. They say, here's a nice guy, do you want to marry her? And she said yes. The Kesuvos b'mea b'chamishim zuz, and they wrote a dowry of 100 or 50 zuz, which is not a very big amount. When she gets older, she's able to take legal action against them to extract the amount that the father would have given as her dowry. Taima diktana. So that sounds like the reason that this is true is because she's a ktana at the time of the marriage. Hagadola vitra. But if she would have been a legal adult at the time, a nara or a bogeres, if the fact that she let the mother or the brother write 50 or 100 zuz, and she didn't and she didn't protest, she was being mavater. She was saying, okay, I'll let it go. This is what I accept. I'm not going to accept anymore. But according to Rebbe, they never lose the dowry. And according to this brisa of Yisoma Shehisia Ima Achamidaita, we're saying that an adult, a legal adult girl, whether an Ira or Bulgaris, she doesn't deserve the amount of dowry that her father would have given. That's what the question is. We know Rabbi just said here in the that she keeps her parnasa. Rabbi Shimon bar Elazar argues, but we passing like Rabbi. But then this other brisa says that if she was a minor when her father or when her mother or brother married her off, and she complained late when she grows up, she can becomes an adult, she can sue them in the Beis Din for what her father would have given them for the dowry. So that makes it sound like once she was she would have been adult when she was married off, she couldn't. That's against Rebbe. That brisa seems to be in accordance with Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That's the question. So the Gemara says, "Lo kasha." It's not this brisa is not against Rebbe's. Hadamachai, hadulamachai. The Rebbe holds that if at the time of the marriage she speaks and says, "No, my father would have given me more than this," then we either do the 10%, or if we know people who knew him, we would say, okay, this is how much you'd give, and we do this. But if she didn't protest, Rabbi does agree that she loses the extra dowry. So it's important to know your rights, so you can advocate on your behalf. But Rabbi agrees that if she was an adult and didn't advocate on her behalf, then she is being mochelas. She's saying, okay, it's okay, I'm not going to take it. Hachinami mistavra, and this explanation makes sense. If you're in the art school, it's now 68 B2. The im kain kasha de Rebbe ad Rebbe, because if we wouldn't explain it this way, there's a contradiction within different teachings of Rebbe. The Tanya because learned in the Brayso Rebbe Omer basan is ons mina achan no tells Eastern nechasim. Rebbe holds that a daughter who is getting sustained, fed and clothed from the father's estate that the brothers are in charge of, she takes 1/10 for her dowry. So we could make a following diuk. Remember, a diuk is we are very exact in the words of the Brisa and say this case yet, but a slightly different case no. So nizunas in she'enu nizunas lo. According to that, Rabbi would only hold if she's already being sustained by the estate, would she get a dowry? But if she wasn't being sustained by the estate, she wouldn't get a dowry at all. So that would contradict this case, but Rabbi says he doesn't distinguish whether she's being getting her food money from the estate or not. Rabbi holds she gets a dowry from the estate. So one brisa then from Rabbi, we made a diuk that holds that if she's not getting her food money from the estate, she doesn't get a dowry. But the other brisa of Rabbi doesn't make a distinction. I love shmamina, but we have to learn from here, from the fact that we have these different brises. Hada demachai, hadulamachai, shmamina. So Rabbi must hold that if she was being that if she was not being fed and they didn't offer a dowry and she didn't ask for one, you don't have to give her a dowry. But we see from these other brisos that in certain cases, if she doesn't speak up, she's not going to get extra. But if she would speak up, she would get a bigger share. Amar Ravina the Rava. Ravina said to Rava, Amar Lan Rava Adabar Ava Mishmach. Rava Adabar Rava told us in your name, meaning in the name of Rava, Bagra Eina Tricha Limchos. If she became a Bogeres, she doesn't need to complain about the amount. But Nises, if she got married before she became a Bogeres, Eina Tricha Limchos. She doesn't need to protest, but we have to give her the proper amount what her father would have given her. Even if she never, so according to the previous, a few lines up, it ends up that before she becomes a Nara, she has to proactively say, I still want my dowry. Even though I'm becoming a Bulgaris, I want my dowry from when I get married. Because right now she's not married and she's not engaged. She doesn't have much prospect, but she has to tell us that because it is true that when she reaches the Bulgaris, there are different halachic statuses between the husband, even when her father would be alive, between what the father could do for her before she's a Bulgaris and after Bulgaris. So certainly when it's when it's her father's estate, there's legal changes when she becomes a Bulgaris. So because of that, she has to tell us what that she doesn't want to waive her right to get a dowry from her father's estate.
I'll let you know. We just finished playing toys.
Good question. So it's a good question. So one thing would be someone would tell her, a father's friend, something like that. The second thing is, and in the United States, it's not as unlikely, but you might be more, we're assuming, how would she know? But how many generations really lived together back then? So she would have maybe an older sister or a cousin, or there might be other people, who she sees all the time, even in her own home, who know that there's this thing about ksuva, and they'll make sure either they'll tell her or they'll ask someone else, what should we do in this case, so that she knows. But yes, it's not something that she would inherently know. The sat, I don't think my brother-in-law, when he was getting his degree in speech therapy, there was, I believe, a Satmar Chassid who also was getting his degree, and Tehila and Noam and Tzipar Malka, I don't know if maybe Shmuley, they went there for a Shabbos, I guess. And Tehila was interested because they had a 12-year-old daughter. She said, I teach, 7th grade. What do you learn in school? So she said stories of Tanakh. It seemed that they didn't learn Chumash, straight Chumash, but stories from Tanakh and Hilchos Tznius. That's all they did. All it was Hilchos. That's the curriculum for the Satmar girls, base, whatever it's called. So even in there, I don't think they would say, know your ksuva rights. So the Gemara says, Miyama Rava Hachi. Did Rava really say this? That that Bagra ain't tzricha limchos. She doesn't need to protest. Ni says if she got married when she was an hour, ain't tzricha limchos. She doesn't need to protest. But Bagra Ni says tzricha limchos. So if she was Bagras and then got married, needs to protest, meaning she has to tell us that she wants the dowry. Otherwise, we're not going to give her a dowry. So did Rava really say this? Well, Eisvei Rav Nachman Yisoma. Rava asked Rav Nachman about this case from our Mishnah. It said Yisoma. So our Mishnah said Yisoma, and that means a minor girl who's a Yisoma. So Vishani lay, and Rav Nachman answered Hadamachi Hadalomache. So even in a case of a katana, only in the case of katana would we give her a dowry. But even if she got married as a nara between the ages of 12 and 12 and a half, if she doesn't declare her right to the dowry, she'll lose her right to the dowry. So how could Ravina? So Ravina said, Rava, it was taught in your name that the only time she would lose her ksuva if she doesn't speak out is if she was a Bulgaris before she got married. But we know that Rava said from our Mishnah that only the Yisoma we advocate on her behalf. But if she's a minor, but even if she's a Nara, she has to proactively say that she wants her dowry from her share from her father's estate. So this contradicts a different statement of Rava. So even according to our Mishnah, if she didn't proactively say that a Nara would lose her her dowry also. But if you're on the art scroll, at the very top line of the second column of 68 B2, we're saying that if she's a Nara, she didn't need to protest. The only time she needs to protest is a Bogeres. So you have a contradiction of what Rava holds in the case of a Nara, of a girl who got married when she was a Nara. That according to from what he made a diuk from our Mishnah, the Nara has to protest, has to proactively tell us that she wants her share, otherwise she doesn't get a dowry. But on the top line of 68B2, it's saying that a Nara, if she gets married or she's a Nara, we're going to make sure she gets her dowry. She doesn't need to actively advocate that tell us that she wants her dowry. Okay, so now going on 68B2, the last paragraph, lo kasha. So, this contradiction between what Rava says, it's not a kasha. We could answer it without great difficulty. Ha deka misnazaminahu. When does she not lose the dowry when she's a Nara? If she's still getting sustained and food from the father's estate. But ha delo kamitza minayu. But where he made the diuk from our Mishnah, that's in the middle paragraph of the second column of 68B2, that only a Yisoma we give her a dowry, but the implication is that a Nara doesn't get a dowry. That's when that Nara is not getting her food, her money for her food from the father's estate. So in that case, if she's already not getting food from her father's estate, she has to proactively tell us that she does want a dowry from her father's estate. I mean, this isn't what the halacha is based on, but if she needs money from the estate for day-to-day stuff, she's certainly going to need the from the estate for a big ticket expense such as a dowry. And this isn't what the halacha is based on, but we could understand the halacha based on that logic. But you could argue, if it's just based on logic, you could say it's true that getting her food isn't so much, but a big ticket item she would need help for. So so that's why logic would only get you so much. We need to know what the Tanaim and Amoraim say. Okay, if you're in the art scroll, it's 68B3 now. Rav Huna Amar Rabbi. Rav Huna said the name of Rabbi. Parnasa Eina Kitnai Ksuva. So the fact that a daughter would get a share, a percentage or something from the father's estate, it's not a condition of the ksuva. So we had this term earlier, a few months ago, I think. Oh no, it doesn't say here. Yeah, we had it on Nun Beis Amud Beis. It's nothing more, but Rashi says, so we said that the fact that a daughter gets fed, that's a condition of the ksuva. But the fact that this daughter would get dowry, that's not from the Tanai Ksuba. So the Gemara says, "My ena Tanai Ksuba." So what does it mean that it's not part of the Tanai Ksuba? What halachic ramifications does that statement have? If you say that, so let's say there was a field. Reuven was the father, and Reuven died. And let's say before he was alive, he sold a field to Shimon. So in certain halachic cases, if there was a mortgage of some sort, or he had a certain type of obligation, whether it's a loan, whether he owed something for somebody. So the halacha is, even if you sold a field, that field was encumbered or mortgaged for the loan. So even if he sold it, it's going to be seized from the purchasers, and the purchasers would have to be made whole, but the purchasers wouldn't get to keep the money. The people who held the mortgage, because this was a lien, they had a lien on the property, they're going to get the property. So if we say that for a dowry, we're able to collect money from encumbered properties, so meaning someone had, the father had sold it, or maybe his adult sons sold it, but if it's part of the ksuva, it was already mortgaged to the ksuva. Utanai ksuva lotar from imshubadim. So if you want to say that dowry, you could seize a previously sold piece of land, because let's say he owned this land when he got married. So so it was mortgaged. The ksuva was mortgaged on this piece of land, was mortgaged for the payment of the ksuva. And if you say that the conditions of a ksuva you don't seize a field if you had sold the field, my kamash malan, what's the novelty of this teaching from Rabbi. Hamayis b'chol yom that motzin leparnasah v'motzin lemizonos. We know from every day it's a very, very common thing that we're going to seize back fields to make a dowry, but we don't take back a field that had previously been owned by the father to pay for the regular food benefits on behalf of the daughter. We know that. We don't need a statement of Rebbe for that. So maybe this is the explanation. Most types of obligations or debts you could take from land, but we're saying that dowry is so special, and actually ksuva itself is so special that the wife is able to collect even the shirt off the husband's back, not just his real estate, but even his movable property. And it's that phrase is in the ksuva, min glima dal kasfe, the shirt or the cloak that's on his back. So if we're saying that you're allowed to collect for the dowry from movable property, shirts, or anything movable, his lawnmower, his measuring cups. We mentioned a couple weeks ago the silver plow. Remember, we were talking about the tzedakah sugya. So you don't have to sell the fancy stuff before tzedakah, and so we say, oh, it's a case where it's a silver plow. Who needs a silver plow? So you sell the silver plow and use a regular metal plow. So that's a movable piece. But something that's part of the conditions of the ksuva, only collect from real estate, but not from movable property. So that's the answer. That's how we're trying to answer what Rebbe's statement, that parnasa is not like Tanai Ksuva, because Tanai Ksuva only gets collected from real estate, and the dowry gets collected even from movable property. So the Gemara says, Rebbe iti migbagav. No, that's not true. According to Rebbe, you can even Rebbe himself would collect a dowry and mizonos, food, from movable property. The Tanya Kazunta Nebraisa. Properties that you have responsibility to, meaning real estate. And property that you don't have a responsibility to, meaning movable stuff. Motzian limzon ha'ish of labanos. You can take, even if a guy sold a barrel to someone else, we could take the barrel back, seize the barrel from the guy he sold it to, and use that barrel to pay for food for the daughter, or for the food of the wife. Divrei Rebbe, these are the words of Rebbe. So Tanai Ksuva or not Tanai Ksuva, Rebbe holds both of them can be collected from movable properties. Elamai parnasa ain't Tanai Ksuva. So what does Rebbe mean? That the dowry is not like a condition of the Ksuva. For the following halacha that we learned in this brisa. If he said when he was on his deathbed that his daughter should not get fed from his estate, ain't shomen lo, we do not listen to him. We give them money from his estate for food anyway. Al yisparnasu benosav minachasav. But if he says, do not give my daughters dowries from my estate, shomen lo, we do listen to him. Sheparnasa ina kitznai ksuva, because the parnasa is not like a condition of the ksuva. So a condition of the ksuva is to give his daughters food. He's not able to cancel that with the deathbed instruction. But the dowry, which is not from the Tanai Ksuva, if he says on his deathbed that don't give my daughters a dowry, we listen to that. I don't remember. Let me look up something from last week. I have a question right now. Okay, so I know this comes up. I didn't look in the Shittim Kubatzes, but let's say at the beginning of Bava Kama, they talk about, the beginning of Bava Basra talks about fences around in between two people's property. Some places they just put like a straw, a very thin fence. Nowadays, something like might get, the bamboo fences, that, they're not completely opaque. Some people put up a wood fence. Some people put up a brick fence. That's not exactly what the mission says, but there's different types of fences, right? Some are more opaque, some are less opaque. But also the other thing is that if you would use a nice gesunta brick, you're going to lose part of the usage of the area that the bricks are laying on. So there's a give or take. So the basic halacha is, you follow the custom of your place. If one guy says, I want a brick fence, and the other guy says, I don't want brick because I don't want to lose, that many square feet of area. I only want, a thin straw fence to not. So it depends. If in that area they use stone fences, the other guy's out of luck. They have to put a stone fence because that's the normal thing in that neighborhood. There's a three-way machlokas in that halacha. What if the common practice in that location is not to put up a fence at all? Is that considered valid? And there is one opinion that says if there's an opinion that says nothing, then they wouldn't have to put a fence. But two of the three opinions are you have to put a fence of some sort. So just using that as a backdrop here, what? Well, bushes would take up even more space than a fence.
And then people do.
Right, but you're right. So I mean, if they agree to that, that's fine. If say no, the bushes are going to take up too much space, and I want just a thin bamboo fence because that will take up very little square footage. So so we follow the custom in that locale. But what if that locale is they don't put up a fence? So here Rabbi, from our Mishnah, we had a lot of discussion on our Mishnah. Rabbi holds you do what the father would have given. But yet 2 weeks ago, last time that we had shared, we spent a lot of time on, do you follow what the father wanted or not, if you knew? So what if you knew that the father was such a cheapskate he wouldn't? What's halach in that case? So I didn't look in the Rishonim, so I don't know. But it's an important thing to keep in mind. It's possible, and we have to look this up, if some Rishonim say that if the people knew him, says he's such a cheapskate he wouldn't give, do we listen to him, or do we say in that case we're not going to rely on our umdana and we'll just give the standard 10%? There's a logic to that, but I have to see what the Rishonim say that or not.
What about a wire fence?
Okay, so in the time of the Gemara that didn't exist, but nowadays, I mean, the bamboo fences that we have now don't exist either. But the idea of what they call the straw fence, it's something that's takes up very, very little area from the field. So that's why I'm using that thing. Nowadays that we have, chain link fences, even though chain link fences now are a lot less common than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now the wood fences are much more in vogue. And there was a time in the mid 90s under Mayor Richard M. Daley that in Chicago it was the black fences with the wrought iron,
What about the left fence? That wasn't there either.
I don't think the halacha would be in favor of that, because that doesn't really, the point when the Gemara in the beginning of Bava Basra, it's about you need some privacy, and you have some rights that some of your area, your square footage shouldn't be lost to the fence unless in that place where they use thick bricks like that. But the thing is, electrocuted fence and a fence with electrocution isn't going to give you any more privacy of looking in. So I don't see that halachically would add anything. And if people don't know, there's a halacha we learned at the end of the first chapter. You're not allowed to have a dangerous dog at your house. So if you have something people don't know that is dangerous, you're not allowed to have something that might cause people to get unsuspecting people from being injured. And even if you put up, beware of dog, that's probably not enough to have the dangerous dog. So Talale Rav L'Rebbe Bein Echiti. So this is something very interesting. So Rav attached it or hung it. So arts we use the word suspended but it's not like a suspension, but it's like being hung in a letter to Rebbe between the lines. So there's a few opinions what this means. So Rashi says that he had sent him a bound thing of questions, and then this one was stuck in like nowadays we would put a post-it note, but he put a loose piece of paper inside the bound thing. Because remember, in those days, to bind something, you really have to you would sew different pieces of parchment together. So it's not clear what Rashi says. Rashi says he stuck it in between the lines. So is he talking about where you have like a long thing and it's clear that this is one thing, this is another thing? Did he kind of write it in between two paragraphs? Or it could be that the Shitin are the different pages and he stuck a piece of parchment inside the other pieces that were sewn together, but this piece wasn't sewn in there. Tosfos mentions the Rach, or Omei, I'm mixing up the Rach with Rashi over here. Tosfos says that the Rach holds that he sent many questions and they were sewn together, and between the sewings, he wrote this question. But Rashi says it's between the lines, and that's what the Yerushalmi says. So according to the Rach, it sounds like he wrote it lahavdil. If you look at some of these old svarim, when the spines fall off, you'll see that there's a paper that they put around the other pages that were binding. So if this would fall off, in the old things, so nowadays they use something like a cheesecloth or something, but in those days they use other pieces of paper just to go around the spine before they actually put the binding on. So according to the Rach, it makes it sound almost like in between the sewings, because you couldn't sew it all the way to the edge. So, or else it would rip right off. So maybe he wrote it in between, like where it was sewn and the end of the parchment. Maybe that's what's around. Whatever it is, it's an unusual situation that the way that he asked this question to Rebbe. So ArtScroll quotes that the Shita says in the Rimigash. So why did he do it so strangely? So the ArtScroll says that the Rimigash in the Shita Megillah says he forgot to write it in, so he had to include it somehow. So he had to write it in somehow where there was space. But then he mentioned around Marim Shif, which to me doesn't make that much sense. That to write Torah Shabbal Peh was prohibited, so he couldn't write it regularly. But he was writing him other stuff. So why was that not Torah Shabbal Peh and this is Torah Shabbal Peh? Anyway, according to many Rishonim, people were allowed to write Torah Shabbal Peh as notes for themselves. There just wasn't allowed to be an oral a formal text of Torah Shabbal Peh. You weren't allowed to write Torah Shabbal Peh for public consumption. So the Marim Shif, to me, I don't understand the Marim Shif. But whatever reason, Rabbi wrote this letter in an unusual way. What if brothers had property from their father's estate that is now encumbered? Other deals are mortgaged on it. But was it already? Basically it's a case where you have the same piece of land is a lien on several different deals. Normally for us, the house is the mortgage is the first thing on the house. And if you have equity, you can take a home equity loan in addition to the mortgage, but the main thing is the mortgage. So sometimes for some commercial properties, I don't know firsthand, but even if something is mortgaged for one thing, certain types of loans, you could give certain properties as collateral also. So the question is, if this field was already collateral for the ksuba and then the brother sold it, does the fact that they now made it that a different deal has a lien on it, does that change? Is that still collectible for their sister for her dowry? Reb Chia was sitting in front of Rebbe when they got this question, and Amar Le, he said to Rebbe, Machru o Mishkenu. Does he mean a case where the brother sold the field, or do they mean that they pledged it, the field, but they didn't really sell it? So did they actually sell it, or is it only a lien? Amar Le, Rebbe said, "Man afkamina, what difference does it make? Bein machru bein shemishkenu motzin leparnasa ve'ein motzin lemizdonos." Whether they sold it or whether they only made a different deal with it, and this field is mortgaged for it, we do collect from these fields for the dowry, but we don't for her regular food. For Rav, why did Rav ask the question if Reb Chia wasn't sure what the case was? Why didn't Reb Chia write it in a case where, in a way that it would be clear what he wanted? So I mean, according to, let's say, Rashi or whatever, that or according to the Rach, where he already wrote the question and they didn't have space, we could answer. He didn't have space, so he had to write it in as few words as possible. But the Gemara doesn't want to say that way. The Gemara feels that he had enough space to word the question properly. If he's asking about a case where the brothers sold the field, he should have said if the brothers sold the field. If they put it as a lien for a property, he should have asked Mishkanu. How come he used the strange term? The brothers Shashibdu, they made it that this land was pledged for something else. Why not say which case it would have been? So Rav Chavai Komi Baile. So the Gemara says Rav was asking both cases. The sovereign he held machru. If I only asked the case if they sold it, hanicha ishalach leidemotzian koshken mishkanu. So if Rabbi would answer that we do take it back, if we would seize back a sold field, we would certainly collect from this field that wasn't yet sold to someone else, but there was only a mortgage that this is the lien for it. But ishalach le'ein motzian. But if you would say that we don't seize back a field for the dowry, akati mishkanu komibayli. That only means because it was already sold, it is now in someone else's possession. But if this field was only mortgaged to someone else and so it's not in someone else's possession yet, I still need to know what the halach would be in that case. So that's why to write sold wasn't going to answer all the situations. And if you would have written in the question, if they pledged it to someone else, so it's mortgaged against it, but it's still in their possession, if that, even the fact that this piece of land is a lien, that these other people have a lien for it, if that prevents us from even collecting for the dowry from it, machru. Certainly, if they sold the field, we're not allowed to seize back the field in order to get the dowry. But shalach li motzian. But if Rebbe would respond to me, he would send back to me the answer that we collected from a pledged field. Akati machru kamibayle. I still don't know the halacha if they sold it, because selling is a stronger. It's no longer in their possession anymore. To seize a field that was already sold, you need to have. That's a much bigger thing from just collecting it from a mortgage field. So after Leishib, so therefore he said that I will write what's the case if it was pledged. It does so it includes both cases, whether it was actually sold or whether it was only the lien. There was a lien against it from a debt or a business deal of some sort. Rabbi Yochanan argues on Rabbi Echad Zeh ve'Echad Zeh ein motziin. He holds that in both cases ein motziin. So it's not so common that someone would argue on Rabbi, especially Rabbi Yochanan, who, according to I think the Rambam, when Rabbi was very old, Rabbi Yochanan was very young. So because Rabbi Yochanan was really 2 generations after Rabbi, but we know sometimes good teachers and good rabbis, they have long careers, and you have talmidim of completely different generations. So Rabbi Yochanan argues on Rabbi and says both for dowry and for mizonos, we don't take from the fields, even if they didn't sell it, but they only made a deal where this field is now, there's a mortgage against it where there's a lien for it. So Ibailahu, they asked Rabbi Yochanan lo shmiela the Rabbi v'ishmiela havim kabale o dilma shmiela level makabale. Did Rabbi Yochanan say this because he didn't know that Rabbi paskin on this case? If he would have known that Rabbi paskin liked it, he wouldn't have said it. Or did Rabbi Yochanan know that Rabbi held this way, and even so he argued on it? So Tashma, so the Gemara is going to try to tell us whether he's arguing on Rabbi or not arguing on Rabbi. Because, I mean, his statement is definitely arguing on Rabbi. But did he say this statement because he didn't know that Rabbi made a psak one way or the other? But if he would have known that Rabbi would have made a psak, he wouldn't have paskin that way. He would have paskin like Rabbi, because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was Rabbeinu Akadosh. Tashma. So learn from this brayso. The Itmar was stated. If a person died and he left 2 daughters and a son, the kanma rishon of it not isur nechasan, and the first daughter got married first, and she took a tenth. V'lo he speak a shnia ligvos. And before the second daughter got married and get a chance to get her daughter, the son died. And now, if there's no son, the estate gets split between the sisters. Rabbi Yochanan shnia vitra. Rabbi Yochanan holds that the second daughter loses her chance to retain a dowry. So let's say he left $1,000. First daughter got married, took a tenth, and 900. Let's say there's a little interest or whatever, so that it's staying at 900, even though the state has to pay the mazonos for the girls. And now that the brother died, the state now gets split again 2 ways to the 2 sisters. So one sister gets 450, the other one gets 450. So if both get 450 like that, then there's no dowry for the second daughter. Whereas if she retains a dowry, the estate would not fully be able to get executed until she would be able to get a dowry, and then whatever's left, she would get $90 because 10% of 900, and then there's 810 left. Each daughter would get $405 as an inheritance. So what do? Do we give them the inheritance and she doesn't get a dowry, but she's going to have this money because she inherits her father, or do we have to wait for her to get married or whatever, or put the money in a trust? I don't know exactly if how halacha would do that, but would we say she would get $90 dollars in a trust for her dowry, and they'd split the rest, and so then each daughter would inherit $405. So Rabbi Yochanan says the second one doesn't get a dowry. She's an heiress now. She owns his money, but she doesn't get a dowry off the top from the estate. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Amr Rabbi Chanina said, Gedol mizu amru, but the Chachamim said more than this. Motzian leparnasa ve'im motzian lemizonos. They say that we take a field away, even if the field was sold, we seize it back in order to give the daughter a dowry, but we don't take back a field that had already been sold, whatever, to feed the daughters. Vad amar shnia vitra, and you're saying that the second daughter loses a dowry. Her right to dowry is so strong that how could you possibly say that, Rabbi Yochanan? V'im isa name man amra. And if Rabbi Yochanan did not know what Rabbi's shita was, Rabbi Yochanan should have told Rabbi Chanina, who said that? You're telling me halacha, but who is that halacha? And the fact that he didn't, obviously he knew that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had that opinion, because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Rabbi is the same person, and so he's arguing on Rabbi. So we're trying to bring a proof from this brisa that he's arguing on Rabbi. He knew that Rabbi had this opinion, and he's arguing. No, but maybe he didn't know that this halacha from Rabbi. But if he heard it, he would have accepted it and not argued. B'shani hasam, but the ika revach beisa. But the difference is when the daughters ended up inheriting their father's estate, because there was no brother. We have to have a case where there was a brother, because if there was no brother, they both would have gotten the split the estate right away, and neither of them would have got a dowry. Is it important that one got married first, and we know that the father? No, it does never. No, it doesn't matter, because she didn't get married while he was alive. But the Ika Revach Beisa, from the fact that she owns this money, that she inherited this money, she has plenty of money to start a home with. So she doesn't need a dowry per se, because she already has all this money, or she has money from her father's estate. Amar le Rav Yemer le Ravashi. Rav Yemer said to Ravashi, Elameata. According to that, though, Ashcha Mitzia Ba'alma. Let's say she found something that was worth a lot of money, the Ika Revach Beisa. So she'd have a lot of money to start a home with that. Hanami dolayavina le'isur chasim. In that case, also would she not get the 10% of the father's estate for a dowry because she's independently wealthy, because she found the the Metzia. So Amar Le, Ana Ravach Beisa Mahani Nifse Kamina. When I say, I mean that she has enough money to start she has enough money to start her household from the property, not stop. So we're not talking about a case where she happens to find money and makes money that way. Amar, so we'll just read a few more lines and from Mincha Amar Amemar says, Basresh is Havia. A daughter gets 1/10 of the father's estate. Amar Ravashi Amemar Ila Baila Sluki Bezuze. Hachanami Dulamazi Lasluki. Are you saying that if the brothers want to buy her out, that they're not able to buy her out because she gets a certain percentage or portion from the estate? Amar Le'in. Amemar saying yes. They can't say, here's money and go. She retains a stake in the estate. What if they want to give her a piece of land and say, this is your land, and now you're not part of the estate anymore? Are they able to do that? You're saying also they're not able to do that? Amar He said, yeah. So according to this statement from Amemar, the daughter has rights, and the brothers cannot buy her out or try to buy with cash or buy her out by giving her a field, but she retains a stake in the estate. We'll leave it here.